Hi again, this is Helen Bellino with our second video showing you how to use our SNS kit number 2, make a chook. So this video is going to show you how to go from your wire armature to applying to the first coat of cement. Okay, so also in this video I'm going to be showing you how to mix up the SNS. So I'll just pop him underneath there for now. I'll start with mixing up the SNS. So in your kit, inside the box, is your bag of powder. Now, SNS is a cement-based product. So like any cement-based product, you really have to take care that you follow the safety directions. Because any cement-based product can be harmful for your lungs and your skin and your eyes if you don't use the correct safety procedures. So mixing SNS, we always need to wear a mask, and you will find a mask in your kit. So we'll pop on our mask. You need to wear safety glasses with side shields, okay, and gloves. So they're your basic safety precautions. The instructions inside the kit and on our website will go into more detail with safety and first aid if need be. Okay, so as long as you follow the directions, you should be fine. So this is how you mix SNS. SNS, you just add water, but you need to get the quantities right. So we've got 2.5 parts powder to 1 part liquid. So it doesn't really matter what measuring instruments you use, as long as it's 1 part liquid and 2.5 parts powder. So we'll take our 1 part liquid and pour it into a container. As you can see, I love recycling, so I won't buy new plastic. I always reuse my plastics. I will tip 1 cup, 2 cups and a half. So that's 1 part liquid, 2.5 parts powder into a container, and then stir. You can see that I'm just using an old kitchen knife because, again, I love recycling. There's all sorts of other applicators and stirrers you can use. There's a few of these stirrers in your kit if you don't have anything at home that you want to use. So as you can see, it takes a little bit of mixing to get that to go through, the liquid to go through the powder and the powder to soak up all that liquid. So you will be mixing for a little while there. See that it's starting to look nice, and we're always after that toothpaste consistency when we're using SNS. So now I've pretty much mixed all the powder through the liquid there, and now I have to leave that to sit for 5 minutes before I use it, and then stir it again. So I'll leave that for 5 minutes, and now I'll show you, I'll move on to the wire chicken. You need to get yourself a bit of old plastic and wrap it around the board. Okay, that's really good little board just to sit your chook on. Because what we do is we start with the bottom. Okay, so alright, so 5 minutes has passed, and now we're going to just stir our SNS mixture up again, and then we're ready to start work. So this is applying your first coat of SNS to your armature. So we start with the bottom. We just basically take big blobs of SNS and plop it onto your armature, and with your knife or applicator, push it right through. This first coat is about pushing it into the wire. Okay, you can see how the newspaper is acting as a barrier and creating the shape of a chook. So it's about scraping it right into the wire there. Okay, it's not about making it smooth, it's not about making it look good, it's just about pushing it through the wires and getting that first rough coat. We make it smooth and look good with our second coat. So this first coat is more about structure, so it's pushing it through the wires. So you can see I've done the bottom. I'm going to come up the sides a little bit like that. Pushing it in. quite rough, isn't it? Once I've done the bottom and I've come up the sides a little bit, I'm going to sit it on the board, on the plastic, and that's where it's going to stay. Alright, so I don't want to keep moving it around once I've got the SNS in there, because I'm going to interfere with the curing process. So now if I want to move it around, I'm going to spin the board, okay, just the board. So we just continue with that process now, adding the SNS all over the rest of the chook, keeping it in one position if you can, and all the way up. And keep pushing it in. I'll show you here. It's a bit more awkward, but you do need to just push it in through those wires. Okay. Now with this wire bit here, we're going to just leave that raw, okay? And if on your chook you did have the one where you left a little bit of wire for the cone, just leave that raw as well. Don't put any SNS on these yet, because you might decide to do something different there. Okay, so but everywhere else, just push it in. And keep going. Okay, so you've covered the whole chook with your first layer. When you've finished, it should look like this. This is after the first layer has cured. Now once you've got it all covered, what you need to do is sit it in a cool, dark place. Do not put it in direct sunlight. Do not put it in front of the heater. SNS cures, it does not dry. It's a chemical process. You must not speed up that process. The slower it takes place, the better. SNS isn't actually fully cured for 29 days. But after just 1 or 2 days, it is dry to the touch and you can continue working it with it. So just make sure that it is in a cool, dark place. If you live in a really hot climate, or if it's very hot in your house, then wrap the whole thing up in plastic while it's curing. Just slows down that process. Plastic doesn't stick to cement-based products, so it'll be easier when it is cured the next day if you want to check it, just to peel the plastic off. It's not going to pull the coating with it. Okay, so that's the first, applying the first coat. So remember, the most important thing is your safety precautions, and the second thing is really pushing the SNS through the wire like that, and you will be left with this quite rough looking coat where you can still see the pattern of the wire. Okay, so that's the end of our second video. And the third one, I'll be showing you how to refine it and to apply the second coat to give you that nice smooth finish. So stay tuned for the next video.